Hello, and welcome to Chapter 4 of the Preschool Years, Module 4.3 Social and Personality Development in the Preschool Years. We'll be looking at the forming of a sense of self, friends and family, the preschooler's social lives, and moral development and aggression. These are our objectives for this section. Explain how preschool age children develop a sense of self and the concept of themselves. Analyze how preschool age children develop a sense of gender. Describe the sorts of social relationships that are typical of preschool age children. And analyze how children's theory of mind changes during the preschool years. We will also be able to describe the changing nature of families and the diversity of parenting styles preschoolers experience, analyze the factors that contribute to child abuse and neglect, describe personal characteristics that may protect children, explain how preschool children develop a moral sense, and analyze theoretical perspectives on the ways in which aggression develops in preschool age children. We will be dividing this recording up in a couple of sections, but this will be the sum total of learning objectives that will be covered in Module 4.3, Social and Personality Development in Preschool Years. So let's get started. Erickson's 8 stages of development. We've already looked at basic trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, and we're looking at initiative versus guilt. You want to make sure you are fully aware of these stages. You will see them again, which means they will turn up on the midterm and final exam. Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory identifies the psychological conflict of the first year as basic trust versus mistrust, which is resolved on the positive side when the balance of care is sympathetic and loving. So when caregivers are sympathetic and loving and responding to infants and children in that first year, they continue to grow and develop that sense of trust. When it comes to moving into autonomy versus shame, that second year, Erikson viewed the conflict of toddlerhood, autonomy versus shame and doubt, it is resolved favorably when parents provide young children with suitable guidance and reasonable choices. So we're going to talk about what that looks like. What is suitable guidance and reasonable choices? Autonomy meaning a sense of self, having a sense of that I am capable, that I can achieve, and I can do, versus shame and doubt, where you doubt that you have the ability. A child begins to feel shame if they're criticized a lot. They'll begin to feel like they're not capable of doing anything. So we want shame is it is a very rarity that shame serves any type of positive purpose in the long run. In the next phase of Erikson's psychological development, that resolving conflict, 8-stage theory, initiative versus guilt, the ages 3 to 6, development that encompasses changes in an individual's understanding of themselves as members of society and meaning of others' behaviors. That's the overall concept of the psychosocial development. The individual, the child, is beginning to understand themselves in relationship to other people that they are around and what their behavior means, as well as the behaviors of others. So, initiative versus guilt around ages 3 to 6. This is where children begin to face conflicts between the desire to be independent or to act independently of their parents and guilt if they don't succeed. They also begin to make their own decisions. Children between the ages of 3 and 6, when we talk about initiative, they experience that want to do it themselves. I can do it myself. You'll hear toddlers say that. They'll make an attempt to do things on their own. They're discovering that they have a sense of purposefulness, where they have capabilities. They want to try new things. They want to join in activities with their peers. The idea of play and having play dates and being in a learning environment allows them to develop new skills of cooperation, and also it allows them to develop their own individual skills. They are in an environment where they can see themselves accomplish things. There's also strides in conscious development. An example, when it comes to a child attempting to pour their first glass of milk, but spilling it or making a mess. Well, if they spill it and make a mess and their parent scolds them and criticizes them and says, "No, I don't, you can't do it, let me do it," that's not going to build their initiative. That will basically lead them to feeling more guilt and shame. Or if you never allow a child to make an attempt because you're fearful that they're going to make a mess or that's going to be a problem, that also will inhibit their ability to have a sense of accomplishment, a sense of self, a sense of initiative. Guilt will come from an overly strict superego as well, and parents who parent with threats or with criticism or with punishment will indeed create a greater sense of guilt and shame. And as I stated, shame has no place in our lives as we develop. The idea of a self concept, I am more into self acceptance, self awareness, as opposed to self concept and self esteem. They begin to understand or think about who they are in their initial self concept. Of course, preschoolers will overestimate their abilities because they have not yet discovered their limitations. When it comes to a person's identity or their set of beliefs, what one is like as an individual, this is what they're gaining, this is what they're understanding. Culture does play a role in shaping the self. Individualism versus collectivism are primary cultural values. Individualism is more associated with Western cultures. Collectivism is associated with Asian cultures, whereas there's a sense of what is good for the society as a whole, and society could mean the society at large or your immediate family, whereas Western culture tends to be me, myself, my own abilities. I can do it on my own. These both have positive aspects, and they each also can have pitfalls or negative aspects as we develop. We need to strike a balance when it comes to collectivism as well as individualistic orientation in development. During preschool period, there are differences in the way children play. According to gender, that tends to be more pronounced. Girls tend to play more with girls, boys will play more with boys, and they also will respond to expectations of the adults. So if the expectation is that the boy is going to be more independent and more competitive, and we put boys in those environments, they will respond that way. If the expectation, and these can fall under gender typing, is that girls are more warmer, they're nurturing, they're more expressive. We don't allow them to be forceful, or we criticize them or correct them more when they're competitive or forceful or independent, then we're thwarting their individualism. Children do hold strong gender stereotypes, even stronger than adults, during this time period. There are both biological perspectives as well as social learning approaches to the development of identity, of gender identity. Gender roles and gender expectations and gendered behavior emerge during preschool. There is some connection when it comes to the biological perspective. Hormones, especially androgens, play a role in shaping gendered behavior. When it comes to social learning, media portrayals of typical or expected gender roles influence the development in this area, and not just media, but family expectations. When children start going to school, responding to teachers, their expectations, and often the way we treat or respond to children of different genders is not even conscious. We don't even realize that we're responding differently. But children at this age are very receptive and they are picking up on it. The cognitive approach to gender identity is where children establish a gender identity via what we call a gender schema That's a sense of gender constancy. It does appear by age 4 or 5, and that's when young people at this age think gender is constant and one cannot change. Gender schema, again, forming a clear sense of identity. That's where that comes from, the perception of yourself as male or female, although they may not have those words. And this is identity. We're not talking about, at this point, we're not talking about children who are struggling with gender identity and gender conformity. We're just talking about just the idea of gender. That's where we talk about gender schemas. When it comes to, again, the cognitive approach, Lawrence Kohlberg looks at gender identity and from a cognitive lens where preschoolers believe gender based on differences in appearance. This is where they're looking at the physical difference. There is awareness that people are permanently male or female, depending on, and that includes fixed and unchangeable biological factors. That's what one approach. Androgyny, that's a state in which gender roles encompass characteristics thought typical of both sexes. So when we talk about androgyny, that's where we avoid viewing the world through gender schemas, where this has to be male or this has to be female, or where females do this and males do that. And it's more so an idea that let young people develop and participate and show up in the world as they choose. Again, androgynous is where we do not define or stereotype activities or desire or ideas or behaviors as male or female. That is androgynous. That's where we get out of gender stereotyping. We do so also understand that transgender children have reported that they can feel different or start feeling different as early as 18 to 24 months. Though they cannot put a word to that or a name to it, they can, when you talk to or interview transgender children, they can often recall feeling different early on. So let's review this section thus far. Erickson's 8 stages theory is autonomy versus shame and doubt. That's 18 months to 3 years old. Initiative versus guilt, 3 to 6. And remember, autonomy means the ability to feel independent and to have confidence in that I can do things, versus shame and doubt, where you lack that confidence in skill abilities. Initiative versus guilt. Initiative means I feel comfortable and safe to try to attempt to do things on my own, versus shame and guilt, where I don't know how to do or I cannot do. We have to be careful to always instill initiative. The self-concept is formed, perception of preschoolers and their own characteristics. They may not be able to say I'm shy or I'm withdrawn, but they can tell you what they like. They define themselves by their physical characteristics, their age, and the things they like. Their self-concept is also formed by their behavior of the parents and other adults around them and their cultural influences. Gender differences, again, emerge early, and they tend to conform to social stereotypes in those early years. They can be explained through a variety of theories, and that's biological, social, and cognitive. So on your check yourself question, according to Erickson, during preschool years, children face a key conflict relating to psychosocial development that involves the development of. If you said C, initiative, you are correct. Check yourself question 2. 5-year-old Kayla has been practicing her jump roping skills for the past 6 weeks so she can enter a contest at school. After one afternoon of practice, she tells her mother, I am a terrific jump roper. This statement is an example of Kayla's increasing development of, and if you selected B, self-concept, you would be correct. Now let's take a look at preschoolers and their family and social lives. As preschoolers get older, their concept of friendship evolves in the quality of their interactions with each other. If a child plays with them, if they share their toys, they feel as though that this person is my friend because we play together. And this person is my friend because she's nice to me or he's nice to me at school. And we like to do the same things. This is how they define or understand the development of their friendships. Children who begin playing by the rules at this age because they're now playing with others. There are categories of play that we can examine. There's functional play, and that is play through throwing a ball or jumping a rope. That's regular everyday play. There is constructive play, and you think if constructing or building something, it requires multiple cognitive and motor skills. So constructive play is going to be, you're going to be creating or building something, and it's going to offer all of these things you see here: motor skills, problem solving, support, and cooperation. So that's going to be play that involves others' children, where they're cooperative and they're working together. Parton talked about types of play, and she defines play. Mildred Parton described two children sitting side by side, separately playing with a similar toy. Those two would be engaged in parallel play because they're not directly playing with each other, but they're playing in proximity to each other. Onlooker play is children watch as other children play. Associative play is where children interact with each other, taking turns with toys or items or crayons when coloring. And in cooperative play, children play together with a similar goal or task in mind. With cooperative play, they're perhaps playing on a team, they're playing a sport, they're working together to accomplish building something, winning the game, scoring the goal. That is cooperative play. Vygotsky argued pretend play expands the cognitive skills. I don't know how many children, if children are allowed to pretend anymore. There are so many electronic toys and ways of entertaining children where everything is kind of brought to them. But cooperative, rather, pretend play or make believe has always been a positive experience because children use their own cognitive skills. Of course, cultural background also will play a role in how children play. If you look at each one of these, I would like for you to um, try to figure out which type of play each student, each child in group are engaged with. So if we look at the upper right-hand corner, the three children that are playing all together, if you look at the two together, you would say you would identify them as a type of cooperative play, whereas the young man in the blue shirt with the little figures on it is more the onlooker. The two little girls that look like they could be sisters on the far upper right hand side, that would be parallel play. They're playing with similar items next to each other, but they are not actually playing together. The picture of the young lady in the middle, that is associative play because they're all playing together, but they're each playing with individual items and so forth. When it comes to theory of mind, understanding what others are thinking, preschoolers are developing that as well. They have a growing appreciation how the mind operates and seeing the world from the perspective of others. This is what helps children to socialize with one another as they become more insightful in understanding the behaviors of others. So when we allow children to interact with other children and we allow them to work with and play with other children and they begin to understand the interaction and we let them do that without our interference, then they as children they work out their differences and they begin to understand each other. They know when someone has done something and it hurts another one's feelings. They can understand that. They begin to learn and understand motives as well. That is a theory of mind. In the false belief task, I would like for you to go to the YouTube channel and take a look at that. I believe it should be embedded in this video, and examine the false belief clip of Sally and Anne and their false belief task. This will also be a discussion question. So with preschoolers, there are limits to their theory of mind. The younger child's belief is incomplete, believing what they see themselves, not necessarily being able to analyze the other child and what the other child did not see. This goes back to the false belief, so make sure you watch that video. Children with autism spectrum disorder will have challenges in doing the false belief task throughout their lifetime, simply that because that is part of the disorder of having a difficulty relating to others. There are cultural factors that also may affect a child's interpretation of the actions of others. Again, make sure you watch the false belief task video. When it comes to the family of preschoolers, there are changes in family life. Although there has been an increase, there has not been an increase in the number of single parents in the last several decades. Single parents have actually decreased. Parents of preschoolers, despite what those parents look like, as long as they provide a warm and supportive environment, then those toddlers will develop genuine friendships and close ties to other children. Parents or whomever is in the home providing loving and caring environments for their children and making sure the child's needs are met. And as long as that happens, whether they're single, married, straight, or gay, those children that grow up in that household that provides warm and caring discipline and care will fare well as they get older. When it comes to effective parenting and teaching desired behaviors, there are several parenting styles that we'll talk about that you will read about here as well. You want to make sure you cover this in the text because you will see this again. Authoritarian parents, authoritarian, notice the difference in that and authoritative. Authoritarian are controlling, punitive, rigid, and cold. Their word is law. They value strict, unquestioning obedience from their children, and they typically do not tolerate expressions of disagreement. This can have a negative effect on the child. Permissive parents provide lax and inconsistent feedback and require very little of their child. Their child has no expectations of a behavior. Authoritative parents are firm, setting clear and consistent limits, but try to reason with their children, giving explanations for why they should behave in a particular way. Children of authoritarian parents tend to fare the best. Uninvolved parents show almost no interest in their children and indifferent, rejecting behavior. Children of uninvolved parents tend to be the worst off. The uninvolved parent could be the neglectful parent, the parent that perhaps is suffering with mental health issues and is not able to provide a loving, caring environment because they're struggling on their own, or the parent that simply is absent. So, how does parenting style influence children? Um, Parents who are high demanding, parents that are very demanding of their children, tend to be more on the authoritarian side. Their children will be withdrawn. They'll show very little sociability as well, and they're not going to be very friendly. How responsive parents are to a child is under authoritative, which is the most desirable. As you see here on the screen, again, the authoritative parent is highly responsive. And with that, they provide, the child will be far more advanced when it comes to being able to develop in a sense that they're independent, they're friendly with peers, they're self-assertive, and self-assertive meaning they have the emotional wherewithal to speak up for themselves. They are, have a voice. They'll try to reason. They will able to communicate well with them as well. When you're a highly responsive parent, you help them to understand when they are being punished. Parents who are low responsive tend to be controlling, punitive, and rigid, and that's going to be the authoritarian parent. When it comes to permissive parents, again, you see here there's no consistency. The children don't have any expectations of any type of behavior, and those children grow up with little or no control as far as what limits on their behavior. When it comes to cultural differences in child rearing practices, the parent's culture of origin will influence the parenting style. Not only will their culture of origin influence parenting styles, but often we parent the way we were parented. So our parents, whatever our parents did with us, we will repeat those behaviors. And if those behaviors were maladaptive, unless we do the work and learn better parenting skills, we will repeat those same maladaptive behaviors. What may not seem as acceptable to one family when it comes to cultural differences may be appropriate to another. So, shy of truly abusive parenting, we should be cautious in how we judge the parenting skills of others. Findings here are based on Western society, what they talk about in the text. Again, parenting style depends on what are the norms of the culture. There is no one parenting style that is universally appropriate because we are all different beings. We are all different and live in different environments. So our parenting is not only going to reflect the society with which we are born, but it will more so reflect how we were parented. When it comes to abuse, neglect, and resilience, child abuse statistics, these numbers are unacceptable, where we talk about at least 500 children are killed by caretakers each year. That is horrific, but we live with these statistics every day. We live next door, down the street. We live on the same block where all these things are going on, where children are abused constantly. We have a 1-800 abuse line, but oftentimes the child that is really in the abusive environment or the abusive home never makes that call. We see them in the grocery store when we shop. Child abuse is the hidden open secret that we must learn to deal with. In the state of Florida, every individual adult is a mandatory reporter. It does not matter what your role, what you do, what your relationship is. We are required to make a report, and it is quite simple. You can go online, report what you see. You remain anonymous. You will never hear back whether a case is opened or not, but at least you can go to bed at night knowing you did something that could have possibly saved a child's life. When it comes to childhood sex abuse, 500 cases occur each year, and those are the ones we know about. The exact numbers of victims of sexual abuse is unknown, as most cases, as I stated, go unreported, sometimes for years. Most victims know or are acquainted with their abuser. Stranger danger is no longer the relevant teaching of predators because predators lure children through social media. They become their friends. Sometimes that's their uncle, sometimes it's mom's boyfriend, and unfortunately, sometimes it's their own father or mother. So we need to be very cautious in teaching our children, not only watching them and teaching them when they're in virtual online environments, but teaching children a good touch and a bad touch, giving them a voice and control over their bodies. If we go back to the type of parenting, that authoritative parent that allows a child to speak up, that allows a child to have an opinion and a voice, that child is less likely to be abused because that child is at least going to speak up. That child will know that their body belongs to them. Teaching children, again, as I said, a good touch and a bad touch. And one thing that we should do, we should never force a child to hug an adult. I don't care who the adult is. I witnessed that not long ago at a friend's family event, and I wanted to say something. In this case, I did not. These were older people, and it was a grandchild, and I just don't see them very often, so I just chose not to become a psychologist at somebody else's social event. However, as we're raising our children, we should, fist bump, high five. If a child does not want to hug someone, that's okay. And in the day of COVID and more serious transmission of viruses, I wouldn't encourage it anyway. Teach them how to greet, and that they do not have to come in that close physical contact with anyone else. When it comes to the type of child abuse, neglect, of course, is the most frequent form. Neglect is where their needs are not met. Perhaps there is inadequate food, there is inadequate shelter, they're not getting the correct medical care, or their parents are not giving them medical care. And we're not talking about in the case where parents do not have access. We're talking about where parents are blatantly disregarding the child's needs. That is neglect. Physical abuse is then the most common, and it goes all the way down. So, what are some signs of child abuse or warning signs? The problem with this list here, if you look at it, where it says most prevalent stressful environments, poverty, single parents, and families with high marital discord. This would lead you to believe that children of wealthy families, children with two parents, and children in homes with a good marriage are less likely to be abused. Unfortunately, there are Jeffrey Epstein victims were from middle and upper class families right here in Palm Beach County. That is sexual abuse. That was sexual trafficking. Most of those girls were from middle and upper class families. So the idea that abuse, that's abuse. We have to understand child abuse is not simply what happens in someone's home. Child and sex abuse, sexual trafficking, all of that is child abuse. It doesn't matter where the victim comes from, what type of home they're in. They are children. If you are under the age of 18, despite the idea of consent, the brain, the cognitive development of a child, we know that the brain continues to develop through age 25. They are not in a position to make a decision to be involved with an adult male. Period. And we must protect our girls and boys from predators and from abusers. And this list is nowhere near complete as to where it occurs. What can we see? What are the characteristics, or what are some of the behaviors of children that are being victimized? Fussy, or rather, instead of fussy, we would look at changes in mood, somatic complaints, where a child is saying they're in pain, but there is no identifiable illness, where they're, shy, they're withdrawn, any type of change in behavior that you had not seen before, anxiousness, withdrawn, there's so, and then sometimes there's just nothing that you can see, but there is something different. So we should always be in close communication with our children. Children should be free to be able to talk to their parents and tell them what's going on. We should not teach children this age that things are secret. There are no secrets. We teach them the difference between private, what goes on, things that are private, and that's a family business. But we never teach them to have secrets, because secrets are shame. And secrets are what's used by pedophiles and by abusers and predators. So you definitely want to be cautious of the language we use when teaching children about privacy. When it comes to physical abuse, what are some of the reasons? With parents, privacy can, as noted on the previous guide, privacy can lead to more abuse. We should be cautious of that. as well. Parents who have the tendency or who are caught up in abusing their children often do not intend to abuse. They, as I stated earlier, may be repeating the patterns of their parenting. They may have come from an abusive home and they're repeating those same parents. Some parents are not clear between the line of physical punishment and abuse. Some parents still feel that corporal punishment, which is spanking, is appropriate. Spanking can lead, we do know that it is not healthy. It leads to lower quality parent child relationships. It does damage that. It can result in mental health issues for children. As parents, as well as parents, it can lead to higher delinquency and some antisocial behaviors. And then it also teaches children that violence is acceptable, is an acceptable way of punishment. And I know many of you are saying, "Oh, well, I got beaten, nothing happened to me," and sure, perhaps some of us were unscathed, but I can assure you, anyone who had corporal punishment with any degree of consistency while they were growing up can identify some type of adult behavior that can be traced back to that, some type of behavior that is not adaptive, that is maladaptive, or that does not serve you. When it comes to the cycle of violence, being abused does not inevitably lead to abuse one's own children. As I stated, sometimes parents, children who grow up in an abusive environment, many will learn how to parent in a healthier way. About 33% of those who are abused will abuse. Physical punishment is seen as a human rights violation across the world, and we ought to be cautious in giving parents skills to punish or to correct. We don't even like to say punish, but we want to correct and change behavior as opposed to punishing the behavior. So a punitive response is not always the best response. When it comes to psychological maltreatment as well, that is a danger for children. Verbal and emotional abuse accompanies physical abuse and is as equally as damaging, if not even more so in some cases. Abuse that begins in early childhood can cause cognitive deficits in brain development as a result of that trauma. So, psychological maltreatment is harming children's behavioral, cognitive, emotional, or physical functioning. Frightening a child with threats, belittling, humiliating, embarrassing them, and chastising them in public. All of these things can result in long lasting damage to one's self esteem, a concept, their self a sense of well being. It will undermine their ability to achieve. It will undermine their idea that they can be autonomous and they can attempt to do things. Extreme cases can lead to behaviors that will get them caught into the justice system, aggression, suicide, depression, as well as changes in the brain. As mentioned, trauma does impact brain development. Early trauma impacts brain development. So, how can we help children become resilient to overcoming the odds? There is resilience is important. Some children do overcome stress and trauma. Often it is with being connected to a responsible and caring adult. Children who are highly resistant tend to have a certain set of characteristics that you see here. Affectionate, easygoing, good communicators, intelligent and things like that. The problem with resilience is sometimes the trauma we experience goes unresolved. There is a danger to our resilience because we continue to take and absorb and put down that trauma and that pain, which will eventually manifest in one way or another as we become adults. So we should be careful in our ability to be resilient that we at some point address the trauma of our past. And we should not ask children to be resilient. We should protect them from these abuses. So if we review, play is important in social learning. Parallel play, onlooker play, associative play, and cooperative play. Make sure you understand those as you go forward in your reading. Social relationships do begin to include friendships at this age. Theory of mind is continuing to develop, and that's where these children see through the eyes of another of their peers. They begin to see the perspective of others. They begin to understand how others think. They're able to assign attributions, nice, friendly, my friend, things like that, and they begin to differentiate between reality and imagination. The home environment for preschoolers should be positive, a home environment that will lead to healthy development. Of course, parental discipline styles may differ. Western culture, authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, as well as uninvolved occur in all cultures, but you will see that in Western cultures. Authoritative parenting is seen as the most effective. When it comes to abuse, it is physical and psychological, and or it will occur in any type of home, but homes that have more stress, the parents may be more likely to be abusive because they're dealing with their own issues. Privacy and physical punishment will contribute to high levels of abuse. And when we say privacy, that's keeping secrets. People who are abused may go on to abuse, but it's only about 33% of abused children become abusive parents. Many get help, and though resilience can help a child survive abuse, they should not have to carry that trauma all of their lives. So when it comes to looking at our check yourself quiz question, which of the following characteristics is found in resilient children? Is that low self-esteem, aggressive, affectionate, or withdrawn? And if you said aggressive, that would be wrong. It would be C, affectionate. Affectionate is one of the characteristics found in resilient children. I'm going to stop this section right here. We will pick back up with moral and aggressive aggression in the developing preschooler.